it's working. This is Michael de Laine of the Copenhagen Voice at Gdansk, talking about cleaning up the Baltic. With me is Minna of Helcom. Minna, what is Helcom? How does it work?
Helcom is an intergovernmental organization dedicated to the protection of the Baltic Sea. Our member states are all the coastal countries and the European community. And we agree on common objectives and actions and goals to try to improve the status of the Baltic Sea.
But what you agree on is not binding in any state, is it?
Well, the Commission is actually the governing body of the Helsinki Convention, which was signed in 1974 to begin with, and that is actually a legally binding document.
But your recommendations are not legally binding.
No, but the objective of the recommendation is to support the implementation of the convention itself, so to help guide the countries.
Is it difficult to get recommendations accepted and implemented?
Some are easier to get accepted than others, but because all the countries are involved in the preparation of the recommendations and they are unanimously adopted, that means that there's room there for negotiation and to work things out.
So how successful have your recommendations been?
Well, I think many of them have actually resulted in improved results for the environmental conditions of the Baltic Sea. For example, the banning of PCBs and DDTs earlier are hazardous substances which affect the immune systems and reproductive capabilities of top predators. And in the 70s, before the 70s, the seals and white-tailed eagles had become seriously, their populations had declined a lot, and after the ban came around, then some of these populations have actually recovered.
You have a new plan called the Baltic Sea Action Plan.
Yes.
What does that entail?
It's an attempt to implement the ecosystem approach to the management of human activities, and we have an ambitious goal of by 2021 reversing the degradation of the Baltic Sea, and it's based on having a good quality marine environment that then supports human social and economic activities.
Well, this means cutting phosphorus and nitrogen inputs and so forth.
Those are part of the action plan, that we cannot achieve our goals unless we do reduce the nutrient inputs to the sea.
And that means some human activities have to be altered, so we say?
Yes, I think we cannot remove any human activities altogether, but by applying best environmental practices and best available technology, there are ways of reducing the pressures from different human activities. And part of the action plan requires the contracting parties to develop their own national implementation programs, where they identify which measures are the most suitable for their contexts and what are the most cost-effective measures for them, so they can achieve the reduction targets.
Some of the pollution sources, like wastewater treatment plants, are comparatively easy to deal with. Farming isn't. Does farming have a longer time in the action plan?
Well, there's also been developments in agriculture. Now there are more of these big animal installations, big animal farms, big pig farms, poultry farms, and these can almost be treated as point source pollutants as well, where a lot of the reductions can be carried out by proper handling of manure, for example, rather than pouring them straight out into a lake. And those are priority pollution sources that need to be addressed at a first hand. And then of course there are other measures, but here, because most of our contracting parties are members also of the EU, and they need to comply with the EU regulations as regards agriculture, then we kind of have to rely that measures are taken under that umbrella, but we obviously try to influence when they do have revisions of their policies.
But arable farming then is perhaps a bigger problem now, because you've got the pesticides and the fungicides and so forth.
We've estimated.
And fertilization,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah. Well, in terms of nutrient pollution, it's been estimated that about 60% comes from agriculture. So that's or diffuse sources, which includes also forestry and scattered dwellings. But it's a big source. Yes.
You mentioned that the EU has signed the Helcom Treaty and therefore is in discussions every time with new recommendations. But how big a clash is there between the common agricultural policy of the EU and the Helcom recommendations and work?
Well, the common agricultural policy as such doesn't contain measures for addressing the impacts to water, and so we're trying to give input to that. But even within the EU, there are several different directives and policies, and I think there's also within the EU a need to integrate some of these policies. It's like the sectoral differences within countries where many of them have conflicting objectives and targets, and so it's a work in process to try to integrate and kind of harmonize all these different measures.
Could it be a good idea to take the non-EU countries around the Baltic into that EU activity?
Well, I think in our case, Russia is the only country that is a non-EU member state of our contracting members. And I think the EU has already recognized the importance of involving non-EU countries in the work of the EU because of transboundary pollution and such. So then there are several EU-Russian bilateral agreements, for example, when it comes to fisheries and such. So I think they're not left out, but they cannot be either required to comply with EU regulations.
Okay. The Baltic Sea Action Plan's targets are to be fulfilled by 2021. What sanctions does Helcom have?
We don't have sanctions
So,
as such. But yeah, I think one important aspect right now is to try to integrate with other international agreements which do have more legally binding natures and to kind of prove that by implementing the Helcom Baltic Sea Action Plan, they're also implementing these other measures, and in that way Helcom is assisting the countries to fulfill their international requirements, and that we shouldn't be differentiating too much between. We are just trying to implement a more Baltic Sea specific approach to these, because a lot of international legislation is not enough either for the Baltic Sea because of the unique nature of the environment here, and we need more stringent measures.
So you want greater collaboration between the various legislative authorities?
Yes, I think that's important, and even especially the sectoral differences. And how do we bring on board the farmers and the industries and the shipping industry as well, because we are all influencing the same resource here, the Baltic Sea.
Okay. Minna, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you.
That's very good.